Recording's in progress. So thanks everybody for coming out tonight. And this is your first time to the JaxNode user group. Thanks for coming out. And hopefully this won't be the only time you come out. So just kind of give everybody kind of a quick introduction to the group and stuff like that. I started the group basically as like a Node.js type of user group. And we've kind of like gone on to kind of cover other topics besides just Node.js. So we still do Node.js. Tonight's presentations is essentially a Node.js presentation. But we also talk about, ancillary technologies and stuff that you might use with Node.js. And also, we get into, microservices, DevOps, that kind of stuff, different database technologies you might use. And so those, we're not solely just Node.js anymore. And we also do a lot of JavaScript frameworks and stuff like that. So we've done over the last year or so, we've done a number of topics, including Svelte and SvelteKit, React, that sort of thing. So basic introduction to the group. I'm gonna go ahead and do my slideshow here. So this is a recruiting picture I did. We're always looking for speakers and stuff for the group. I think I have somebody lined up for next month, but I'm not positive. But it can be pretty much on any kind of technical topic you want to do. It doesn't have to be strictly Node.js or JavaScript related. So, we had somebody came a couple of years ago who did a presentation on information security, which is always an important topic and stuff. So, and it's in that area and stuff we're certainly open to. All right. A little bit about me. My name is David Fecky. I have a YouTube channel called the Polyglot, and I also have a blog you can go to where I talk about the stuff. There we go. Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yes. It came through. I was trying to forward it.
No, I'm gonna try to file here real quick. So no problem. Do this. For the people that are online on Zoom and stuff like that, I think this should just pick right back up. If we get dropped for a second or whatever, I'll get it right back up. All right. Let's do AV guest. All right, can everybody hear me? All right.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. All right, very good. We'll come back here. All right. So as I was saying before, we're always looking for speakers. So if anybody's interested in speaking, please let me know. A little bit about me. I have a YouTube channel called the Polyglot Engineer, and I talk about a lot of different subjects on there. So my day job, I work as a mobile developer, and so I cover those topics, but I also cover web topics because I spent a long time as a web developer, and so I'm trying to follow this stuff and keep on top of it. And then I also have two Twitter handles, JaxNode and Polyglot Engine 1. That I use to kind of like tweet out, interesting articles and stuff that I found. And I also have a GitHub page here. And so the presentations tonight actually will be up on the GitHub page as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about web applications. So there's a lot in the Node ecosystem, and it seems like every day or something like that, there's a new JavaScript web application framework that's coming out. But probably one of the most popular ones that's been out there forever has been Express. It's got started, right around the time that Node got started. There's still a lot of people that are using it, but Express is, I think, been at version 4 now for like 10 years and stuff like that. There's not a lot of active development going on in Express, but it's pretty stable. So people like using it because of that. There's another framework that's also pretty popular called Fastify, which is, I think, mainly geared for people that are doing API type development with Node. And then SvelteKit, Next.js, there's a number of different web application frameworks that have become pretty popular with Node. But one of the ones that's really growing in popularity is Next.js. So kind of a quick primer on Next. So it is a React framework. Is everybody here familiar with React? Okay, good. So React just recently turned 10 years old, so it's also kind of a mature framework at this point, but it's still being actively developed. And it started strictly as a view framework at Facebook for doing client-side applications and application widgets and that sort of thing. And there's a lot of different flavors of React now. It's hard to keep track of. It seems like there's almost as many React flavors as there are web application frameworks for Node. So there's Gatsby. I'm going to minimize this window here. There we go. So there's Preact, Remix, React Native. There's a ton of React frameworks out there. I'm sure I'm missing 100 of them, but I've actually used Gatsby, and Remix is also becoming kind of popular now as well. I think they were recently brought into Shopify, and so Shopify is now the main sponsor for that framework. And then another thing too is that React is heavily used essentially for building single page applications. So you have like a single endpoint that you point your browser to, and the whole application will load up inside of that. And this is kind of a basic functional component in React. And so you just have a function here, and you return back in the function, you return back HTML. This would be considered JSX. So React also has its own essentially derivation of JavaScript, and the whole idea is so that you can intermix your HTML with your JavaScript. And something that I started hearing about not too long after React was introduced was this term isomorphic apps. And what that really refers to as server-side apps that could also render and serve up React applications. And so there were some changes that people have made to Express where you could actually use React as the rendering engine as an example. But I didn't see a lot of heavy adoption at the time. But one of the key benefits there is that you could do server-based rendering. And so there's a lot of efficiencies and stuff that could be gained from actually using being able to do rendering and stuff on the server. So Next was first released in October 25th, 2016. Coincidentally, also my birthday. And it was created by Guillermo Rauch, who's the creator of Socket.io and also the founder of Vercel. And one of the things that's nice about Next is it solves some of the SEO problems that you have from applications and stuff where you want to be able to have multiple endpoints. And so, the way that Google and these other search engines work is that they go out and they look for pages and links to pages and stuff like that. They're spidering. And so one of the things you want to be able to do with your web applications, you want it to be easy for the spiders and stuff to find the content and stuff that are on your web application, especially if it's a publicly available application. And so one of the ways they make this possible is through something they call the link router. And there's been some changes to link router over the years. But you can also use this to create static websites. So like, for instance, Gatsby is meant specifically for building static websites that you can just host statically. You don't have to have a JavaScript engine to serve this stuff up from a server. They need to be able to host files. But you can do the same thing with Next. So you can actually statically generate content as well with Next. So SPAs refer to single page applications. So a lot of these other frameworks like Angular, Aurelia, Backbone, Ember are all examples of application frameworks that were originally developed for building client-side single page applications. And React was also the same way. And these are great for web apps that just need to run on one page, but it's not necessarily something you want to use for, I think, most web apps. And it's one of the things that kind of turned me off from React initially, was that I want to be able to have a page that I can point a user to. And so Next allows you to do that. So SPAs are kind of bad for SEO. I think there's been some work that's been done on trying to fix the spiders and stuff like that, so they do a better job of parsing through single page applications, but just traditionally they've been very bad for SEO. So when I think of traditional web applications, one of the jokes about Next.js is it's the new PHP. But a lot of these older traditional web application frameworks like PHP, ASP.NET, JSP, Cold Fusion are all examples of technologies that essentially just run on the server. And so you write code that essentially just generates HTML that will be consumed by the browser or whatever device. And then there's also MVC-based apps, which also allow for routes, but they also have the ability to do pages as well. And then Express.js is an example of a web application framework that uses routes in lieu of pages. So one of the things that's nice about Next is it really provides the best of both worlds. And so you can compose with React like you're used to doing. It uses a file system-based routing. It can also do code splitting, and you can set it up so that it only uses imports that are used on a page, so you don't have to bundle everything up into a single application. And it can pre-render your React views on the server. And so it has the capability of doing CSR, SSR, or SSG, and that's client-side rendering, server-side rendering, or static site generation. So Next can do all three things. One of the things that I was reading up on when I was preparing for this presentation was that One of the technologies that comes bundled now with Next is SWC, which is short for the Speedy Web Compiler. And this is a next generation based compiler. And so anybody that's followed React and the React ecosystem, the way that React essentially has been rendered when they're taking the JSX and actually converting it into HTML that can be used in the browser. Initially it used, I believe it used Babel to do the transpiling, to take that JSX and convert it into HTML and JavaScript. And so one of the things they've done with SWC is they actually have it set up so that it's using a Rust-based compiler. So because of that, it's very, very fast, and it's up to 20 times faster than Babel for doing the compiler. So that comes baked into Next.js as well. So the basic product structure, just like any other Node application, it's going to have a package.json file where you can configure your scripts and which modules and stuff you want to use. All your pages will basically be put inside of a folder called pages. And then there's a place where you can enter in, global parameters and stuff like that, which would be your _app.js file. You can also do API routes. So if you need to be able to do Rust-based routing. All right, Keith. So if you need to be able to do Rust-based routing, you can do that as well using Next.js. And they also have a public or a static folder where you can put your static content that needs to be repurposed and stuff inside of the application. So this is the very simplest type of page that you can do using Next. And so you can see here, I'm not doing any includes. I don't have to include React. I can just say export a function, and then in the function, I just return my HTML. And so that's literally all you need to do to be able to create a page inside of Next. For doing linking and stuff like that, all you have to do is import the Next link, and then there's a link component that you can use, and you just specify where you want, which page you want to link to using the href. And then with the routing, Next has its own router. And so one of the things that's neat about this is that you can actually set up client-side events where you can say, I would just want to push to this page, and it will actually take you to that page as well. So you can also, with your JavaScript, you can also navigate pretty easily between your different pages as well. So that brings us to the real subject tonight. Is there's been kind of a massive overhaul that Next has made with their app router. And one of the key differences now is that there's a /app directory. And so anything that you're going to use inside of the app router will basically be put inside of that app folder. And a page, instead of being it used to be like if you want to have like an about page, you would say about.js. Now you create a folder called about, and then inside of that folder you would say page.tsx or page.jsx. And then inside of that, the thing that's neat about that is now you can define different pages for different types of conditions that might happen for that route. So for instance, if you get an error, you can actually use a error.js file to manage what happens if an error occurs on that page. There's also a not found JS for 404 type errors as well. And there's also a loading JS file that you can use as well so you can have like a skeleton you might want to render out while the content for the main page is actually loading up. They also have a layout, which you can include in there as well. So if you need to have a custom layout for your page, you can do that inside of that folder as well. And they also include support for metadata, sitemaps, and robots and stuff like that. So all the regular stuff you'd want to have with a website or web application, stuff like that, you can configure pretty easily with Next. So one of the topics I've been hearing a lot in the React community is this idea of server components. Meta is the main sponsor for React. They've been talking a lot about server components. And so there's actually been support for server components since Next.js 12. But we're really starting to see the benefits of that with the current version of Next. So server components are for React in general, but not just for Next. And so I imagine there's a version of this that you can also use with Remix and other frameworks that people might be working on as well. I think Gatsby also has a notion of a server component as well. And so the whole idea for server components is they're just pre-rendered before you go to the browser. So if you need to be able to render something before you send it to the browser, you can do that with a server component. And it can either be statically or dynamically generated. And they also have the concept of client-side components. So normally when you're writing React component in the past, it's always been considered a client-side component. So now what you have to do, if you want to specify in Next that a component is specifically a client-side component, what you need to do is you need to put at the top of the file, you need to put in a use client. Just like there used to be like a use strict that people would use with JavaScript, now there's a use client, which lets the compiler know that this is specifically going to be a component for the client side. And so this content is not pre-rendered. So this is an example here of a client-side component. So you can see at the very top of the file, there's a use client. And then you just pass in your props like you normally would do with a React component. And it renders it out on the client side. And this specific slide here, we're talking about server actions. And so this is kind of the new hotness with Next. And so the app router is now considered stable. Like when they initially did 13, the app router was not considered to be a stable part of the framework. It is now. Server actions right now are still alpha. So if you go and look at the documentation and stuff for server actions, they're still saying alpha. So this is probably not something you want to put into production right now, but they kind of went stable with the server components and the app router. So I imagine that server actions will also become stable here in the not too distant future. And so the thing to think about with server actions is they're a way of doing or handling AJAX type requests without having to do a separate like API router. And so instead of having to create like the REST infrastructure for for handling those types of calls, you can actually just include it inside of your server component. And you can even compose, like you can create server actions and then compose which ones you want to use inside of your application. And so the key thing here is like all you have to do when you're creating a server action, there's two things you need to do. One of the things is you need to enable it because it's still alpha. But the second thing you need to do is you need to preface it with a use server at basically the top part of the function. And then you're ready to go. And so this is an example of a server function that essentially takes data from a form. And so you can see right here on the second line, there's a use server. So you define your function first, and then you can specify use server. Something else you'll notice is that this is a async function. So you also will want to make sure that the function you're creating is an async function. And so if there's a input field called has an ID or name of title, what you would do is in this case, I'm importing in, this is the form data is coming in as a variable called data. So you just say data.get, whatever the name of the field is you're trying to pull the data from, and then get the value of that. And then you can, once you've done that, you can use that data however you want. And so this example here, it's taking in a title, and then it's saving in some type of persistence, and then it's doing a redirect to a different route. So the idea here is, you would save this data and then take the user back to a different page. So to configure this, all you have to do is go to the next config file for your project, and there's specify experimental server actions is true, and you're all set. Next also has something that they support called dynamic routes. And the idea here is that you can design your routes so that if you want to have a parameter in your, in your URL, in this case, they have a parameter here called slug. And then when you go to render that page, what I'll do is whatever is passed in, let's say you have a slug for a specific blog article on, Next.js, you can have a Next.js. That becomes your slug, and then that would get put here into this this my post in the div. As I was saying before, you can do API routes. This is the way you can do a REST API inside your application, and it uses a request and response next types, and they also support verbs for function names like get, post, delete, put, that sort of thing. So anything that's handled by HTTP, you can use that inside of your API route. And this is a kind of a quick example of a one that's using the get verb here. And here they're doing something with a Mongo API, and then getting the response, and then handling the response back out through a next response. So to create a Next app, all you have to do is use the create Next app module. And we'll do a demo of this here in just a second. But in this case, all you have to do is npx create Next app, and it will create a brand new Next app for you. You can also just do this manually. You can go in and take an existing page you might have created in JSX, and then you just essentially all you have to do is in your Node application, you just specify, you add Next as a module in there, and it'll be able to host that out that way as well. All right. There's also a lot of neat functions and stuff that are available to you as well. So they have functions in there for headers, cookies. They have this one that's called generic static params. Generic static params is if you're trying to do static paths for, there used to be a function you could use, in fact, it's still in the if you're not using the app router, called get static paths. But now it's called generate static params. There's also a redirect function. There's also a revalidate path. The revalidate path is a function you want to use. Let's say you're using a server action to update some data that's on your page, and then you want to refresh the data that's on the page. You use revalidate path to do that. And something else that's of interest is that there's been a lot of work over the last year or so in the Node.js community because the fetch that works inside the browser worked a little bit differently than the fetch that worked in a Node.js. And so there's actually a Node.js module, I think it's called Node-fetch, that people have been using for years, but it does not work exactly the same as the fetch that's in the browser. And so what they did with the next project is they actually have a shim that you can use. And so fetch will work the same. And there's also been work that's been done on the Node.js side where they're setting it up so that fetch will work the same way as it does in the browser. So with that, let's go ahead and do a demo. So what I'm going to do first here is I'm just going to come out. Can everybody see this okay? Hopefully the type's big enough and stuff like that. I'm going to create a new project here. Actually, let's just do this. I'm going to say npx create Next app latest. All right, so ask me if I want to proceed. Yes. And let's just call this demo. And it's giving me the option here whether or not I want to set up a TypeScript or not for my project. I'm going to say yes. I'm also going to use ESLint for my linter. It gives you the option to pre-install Tailwind CSS. I'm going to say yes to that as well. It's going to be the option to use a source directory. I'm going to say no. And then now the app router, which we're just talking about, you can either gen a project using the app router or not. It's defaulting to yes because it's considered stable. So I'm going to say yes. It's asked me if I want to use the import alias. I'm going to say no. And it's coming out here and it's scaffolding out a new project. And we'll see how long this takes.
Yeah, in my experience, it takes forever. It takes like 5 minutes. I just want to private on it.
But for the last couple of times I've tried to do this, it's actually been pretty fast. It's done it in a couple of seconds. But I guess I have a faster internet connection at home.
Yeah, I think it might be my internet. I'm like I just like kind of put it away. Just like go to the bathroom and just like watch a video.
Yeah. If you've done it recently, I think this is the first time I've run this on this machine. This is not my regular computer. This is just so everybody knows. There's a sticker on here that says Windows 7. To give you an idea how old this laptop is. There we go. All right, so there it's done. So now I'm gonna CD into demo. All right. So let's open that up in VS Code. All right. So I'm using the Windows subsystem for Linux here. There we go. All right. So if we look at the project structure, we can see since I used the app router, there is this app directory in here. And there's a couple of files in here. We've got a ICO file. We've got globals.css. We've got a layout file. And we also have a page.tsx here. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to copy out. Actually, before I do that, let me just show you what the boilerplate looks like if you're just generating out a project here. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And let's come over here and let's open up a tab here. And I'm going to say localhost 3000. There we go. All right, so here's the page here that creates. So if I come back into here, I'm just gonna come over here and let's go down here and delete all this stuff out. There we go. And I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna put in an H1 tag. And we'll give a class name. And since we're using Tailwind, I'm going to say text-for Excel. And save this. Now, if I come back, I've seen the change. So like a lot of other React frameworks and stuff like that, there's hot reloading. So you can see, live changes and stuff like that. So the company where I work now, it's like we have these native applications that we use, and then we also have React native applications that we develop. And one of the things the developers love about React Native is that you can actually see live changes. You can type in your changes and see it being reflected in the simulator on the device immediately and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that's nice about these different web technologies and stuff like that. With the hot reloading and stuff like that, you can see your changes right away. So that is just kind of a very quick example of how to just gin up and create a new project. So if I want to come over here and I want to create like a new page, let's say I want to create a new page. I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna call this availability. Oops. And I already made my first demo mistake. Rename that. This is a folder, right? Yeah, it's a folder. And then when we come over here is I'm gonna come over here and create a new file. And the file I'm gonna call page.tsx. All right. So I'm just gonna come over here and I'm going to copy this and paste that in here. And this I'll call my availability page, and then I'll change that to availability. All right. So now if I come back to the app, I come here and I type in availability. That brings us to the availability page. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and kill that. And let me do this. Go into next demo. Oh, Next.js. Demo. There we go. All right. Let me go ahead and kill that. And we'll open this up. Oops. Actually, I've got 3 different applications in here. So let me kill this again. All right. So I'm going to go into this this one here called AV weather. All right. So what I want to do is I want to create a application where I can pull up weather that pilots might want to use to detect what the current weather is at a certain airport. And every airport has like an individual code they use. I fly out of Craig, which uses CRG as the identifier. So let's try to see if we can't run an example of that here real quick. Okay. So here we have an app, and in that app, we've got a page. And that page, not right now. So in this page here, I have a home page I'm returning, and inside that home page, I'm going to display a widget, which has my weather in it. And so if I come over here to my components, here's that component. And so I just went in here, I just defined all the different props I'm going to be using inside of this widget, and then I render it out. So let's go ahead and try running this and see what happens. Next not found. Let's try this. All right. let's try running that now and see what happens. All right. Is anybody here good at converting Celsius to Fahrenheit, their temperatures?
It's been
Nope.
so long.
Yeah.
Use the calculator now.
Yeah, yeah. So with aviation weather, what's going on here? Wait. Let's wait in the terminal. Let's see what I did wrong here real quick. This is funny. This worked earlier when I tried it earlier, but let's see here. Migrate to the metadata API. Let me try making a quick change here. See if this fixes it.
Probably just like that top left away.
Yeah, it might not, but it worked before I tried to run it. So let me do this. I'm going to remove this head here. All right, and let's see what happens. And it still failed here. So rather than do a live debug, do this real quick. Interesting. So what it should do, and this is one of the features I love about Next. So previously they had a function that you'd use called get server-side props. And what that would do is that when you were going to render out a page or load up a page in Next, what it would do is it actually would go and it would use that to like gather any data that you needed to essentially populate or render into your page. And then that would pass that into the main component that you had for that. Well, with the new app router, you don't need to do that anymore. You can just you can create a async function and stuff like that. And then if you call that inside of your function, then it'll load that up. So I'm gonna make a quick change here. And let's try this. I'm gonna say get weather. So instead of loading it up here, I'm just going to comment this out.
If you put that inside of the actual function declaration, it'll work.
It will, and that's actually what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to pass it in. The reason why I changed that is because I added a function here called weather action that I was passing in, and I need to be able to update it at the global level for the page. So, oops. All right, let's try this again. All right. So now I'm just going to say const. All right, now let's go back and try to render that. Fetch failed. So I'm wondering if there might be something here where it's not able to call that endpoint for some reason. So I'm going to go with my second demo, since that one is a big demo fail. And let's go ahead and kill that. All right. And here's a to-do app. And this is using a SQLite database locally. So there's no chance that it could fail because it's running locally. Let that open up. And it just, I think I already have this loaded up, but we'll find out. Let's try running that. Okay, good. So this seems to be working. Let's come back here and reload this. All right. So far so good. So here, this is a simple to-do app. I can come over here and I can click on one of these, and this is actually crossing out the to-do here. If I want to create a new to-do, I can go on this new button here, and this opens up a new page, and I can say go create, and there you can see it's already populated here. And let me show the code for this to give you an idea of how this is working. So here I have I'm using Prisma to essentially do all the magic of hosting the SQLite database. And I don't know if everybody here is familiar with Prisma or not, but the nice thing about Prisma is that you can, right now I'm pointing to a SQLite database because I'm just running this locally on my laptop. If you want to point it to like Postgres or Oracle or MySQL, you can migrate over with using the same data model. And so right here, I've got this migration.sql. This is creating the table that I'm using. But this is all based off of a schema here that I've created inside of this schema.prisma file. And so here I've modeled a to-do, and that to-do, I'm setting it up with a default value, title, and then a Boolean value, let me know when it's complete. And then I'm also doing a create at, updated at, so I can keep track of that as well. And then inside of the application here, if I go to the home page here, you can see that we have a page here. And what we're doing is we're calling get to-dos, which is pulling back a list of all of our to-dos. And then inside of here, what I'm doing is I'm taking those to-dos and I'm doing a map on that. And then I'm rendering out a client-side component for each one of those to-do items. So if I come here, I look at my components, I look at this to-do item. One of the things you can see here is that it is using, has all these props that are set up here. And then inside of there, there's basically an onChange function you can call. And it's calling this toggle to-do, which is going to take the ID of the to-do item and then what the value is, whether it's checked or not checked. And the way that's working is that it's actually, that was passed in. This toggle to-do was passed in as a server action. So if I come back to the page.tsx file here, and we take a look at that toggle to-do, here is the toggle to-do. And what this is actually doing is it's specifying use server here. And then once it gets the those values back, it's coming here, it's just doing an update to that row where the ID is equal to the ID. And then it's passing in the complete property into Prisma to let it know that that's the value it's going to update. So it's literally that simple. And then if we go to the new page here, we can see that here we have a new page. It's got a very simple form in it. And in the form, we've got an input for the text for the title of what our to-do item was. And then there's buttons here. There's a button here to submit it. And one thing you notice here is that all you have to do for the action here is specify create to do. And what create to do is a server action. So, if you've worked, the thing that's nice about this is now that function is embedded here inside of the new page, but this is also composable. So I could keep all my actions in a separate actions folder, as an example, and just import that in and use that specific action here. So you can also reuse them if you need to. But in this case, I'm just using it here inside the page. And then once it's done creating a new item here, it just redirects back out to the home page. And so this is an example right here. I think a pretty good example of how you can use server actions with your client-side components, and also for like a whole form post. So if you're just doing a form post on the page, you can handle that using server actions as well. So they're pretty flexible as well. All right.
So just to clarify, your actual to-do list is in the client side?
No, the to-do list is actually server side. So this works over, this is work on a server. So it's all being rendered out as a server component. So
It is being rendered as a server component?
yes, yeah.
I
So
thought you said those being rendered client side.
so the actual to-do component itself is a client-side component. So if I come back here to the to-do item here,
Yeah.
and we take a look at this, if we go up to the very top, you'll see this is use client. So here we're specifically saying that this component is a client-side component, but we're passing in all the props and stuff then from the server side. So it's getting rendered initially. It's being rendered out as a with the data coming from the server. But if we're going in there and we're making changes, it's like an Ajax type of control.
I
So
think that's what I'm getting at.
yes.
So it's the client is asking the server for the to-do.
Exactly. So if we look right here at this toggle to do,
Just to kind of like, sorry to keep going down this path here, I feel like that's the seemingly difference between Next 13 and previous iterations, where this feels very either or, whereas with Next 12 and under, it was like I could have my to-do items rendered server side and it's hydrated and updated client side.
that's correct. Yeah.
So it's very much not that now.
Yeah. And so the thing about it is that the way I try to think about it is that Next.js now is kind of like server side by default. And then previously,
But it's limited in what can be server side, it seems.
like specifically like sort of like interactive type of functionality, or
Well, I mean, so you have the default state of your to-dos, right?
yeah.
Okay, so that on the client side, yes, we're updating and manipulating that state, but the default state is not being rendered as it previously was.
Okay. Yeah.
That clarify my kind of like.
Yeah, so like one of the things I was mentioning before, like previously, like if you're rendering stuff on the server side, like data specifically, like for your state, you would use get static props to gather that data, and then you could combine that or use that with it would render out the content, but then as you made changes and stuff, that would all happen on the client side. So for instance, like what you would do is like a lot of times if you had, let's say a form, for example, where you had to post stuff back, or even like a little widget like this, instead of using a server action to pass that data back, the state, so to speak, you would use an API route to do that. So you'd set up a route that would accept kind of REST request. Now you can just do a server action. You don't have to do that. So yeah, there's a number of differences and stuff like that. And one of the things that's good is if you go to the documentation, I think they've done a really good job of documenting out all the stuff that's in the app router. So if you come to the Next.js.org docs, there's an option here for just using the pages router, which is the original router that came with Next.js, or the app router. And so you can come to here and you can start looking at some of the differences with rendering and data fetching and stuff like that. I'm personally brand new to this myself, but it's like as far as like working with the app router, but what I'm seeing, I'm liking it a lot because it has a lot of, now you can do like a request like that from the client side to the server without having to do like a whole route. So I don't know if I answered your question correctly or not, but yeah, I mean, there are some noticeable differences with the way the state's handled in the newer version of the app router. All right. So let me go back here. My last slide here is questions. There's any more questions?
Yeah, what kind of strategies have you come across for like global state management server components? Meaning like just an example, coming from a standard React world, you have a user, right? You might be referencing this user and
Sure.
many components, you throw it on the context. What kind of strategies for next server components?
So what I've seen examples of so far with this new version is there's a cookies function inside of the framework. And so what you can do is, let's say you have somebody that's logged in and they have like a unique user ID that you want to tie to that user. So what you would do is once the user's logged in, you use this cookies function and you would set a cookie value for that user. This is an example. And then once you've done that, now, and as you're going around to different pages, you can essentially use that value as tracking the state of the user. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are middleware that people are creating very similar to like Redux for traditional React, where they use that as like a state management framework and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's already got something like that cooking on for the app router with Next.js.
Something I did come across was somebody kind of wrote their own like utility function using React's undocumented cache function.
Yes.
Which, I mean, it's like, yeah, it works, but undocumented features is
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is documented. There's something to keep in mind here is some of the stuff like the server actions are still alpha. So it's like I wouldn't deploy anything that's into production right now that's using that feature. But if you come over here and you take a look at their documentation, one of the things that you'll see is like if I come here to like functions, for example, and I go to cookies.
Yeah, I came across that. It felt that, I mean, I was using it for like a user authentication token, which felt right. Using it as kind of a catch-all felt a little fun.
Yeah.
Something else they suggest is more or less you just kind of rig up an API call, and if you don't revalidate it, it'll cache the value, and so you're not actually making a request. Now, like let's say you're calling an external API.
Yes.
Yeah, it has its own cache. You'll hit that and set it back to making the network call. That was one thing they suggested, but then also.
So they have a whole page here on that, where they talk about using the fetch, and there's
Yeah, this is.
the revalidate here, right here.
Yep. Yeah. That's kind of
Specifically, there's a next property you can pass in here where you can set that. And there's also stuff in here. This is a get user. Cache from React. Yep. So there's a lot of stuff like that in here. So what I've seen so far, I've been pretty impressed. So, you know, my experience with React has mainly been like I've done a couple sites with Gatsby, and then I've done some mobile applications using React Native. And so a lot of the stuff with, you know, like using Redux and stuff like that, a lot of the, like the heavy state management for like single page applications and stuff, I haven't had to deal with. But it's like this has got me pretty excited because this reminds me a lot of the way I used to develop web applications. So I used to use a lot of like when I was doing .NET, I was using ASP.NET MVC, which has a concept of routes, just like Ruby on Rails and other Express.js, that sort of thing. But I've also used like PHP and Cold Fusion, and they have the concept of pages, and even Java. They had Java server pages and servlets and stuff like that, where, you know, essentially it's just request response. It's like you get the request to the service, and then you just output the HTML to the user with all the functionality. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I'm not sure if we have a speaker lined up for next month or not, but if anybody's interesting or has a topic they want to talk about, you know, please let me know. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and give everybody their time back for the rest of the evening. All right. Where'd my Zoom go? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I'm starving. I'm going to